Welcome to the latest BuffZone podcast. I'm Brian Howell. I'm pleased as always to be joined by my colleague Pat Rooney. And Pat, how you doing? You've covered one basketball game at this point, like I have, but you're now in the thick of men's basketball season. But we're going to talk some football as well.
Doing well, sir. How you doing? And yeah, great to get things going this week with basketball. It's always a lot of excitement to get things going. Sloppy first night, but we'll see how they respond against UNC Northern Colorado, not North Carolina, on
Yeah,
Friday night.
yeah. Well, let's real quick before we get to football. Let's just talk about basketball. Since you mentioned it, both teams, the men and women, have had their openers. As we're doing this on Thursday, the women are going to play their home opener on Thursday night against UNC. But I didn't watch the men, but I was up in Laramie covering the women, and they had a slow start. And then I saw the men start, and I was like, "Oh boy, that's not looking good." Then all of a sudden, I look and they won by 20. So, what did you think of that first game for the men?
I thought it would be sloppy. I didn't maybe think it would be quite that sloppy out of the gate, but new team, a lot of new pieces that they forced a lot of things early. They were jittery. They sped themselves up a little bit
Mhm.
in that game with the lights turned on. I wouldn't overreact to the first game. It was a first game with a whole new look team, and they fell behind 17, but by the end of that game, that was a 37-point swing
Yeah,
from the time they were down 17 points to the time that they won by 20. So they got together eventually, cleaned things up. I think on Friday night, the things to look for, the turnovers, this has been an issue. It's been an issue with the team at times, even with better teams than this one in the last 2 years. But it's been another issue with this club, even in the preseason. They had a lot of turnovers in their exhibition against Pomona Pitzer. They had a lot of turnovers in their closed scrimmage against Texas. And then they had a lot of turnovers in the first 30 minutes or so, 25 to 30 minutes against Eastern Washington. Once they
yeah,
finally clean it up, lo and behold, they start pulling away. So I think that's what to look for on Friday night and just have a better start. You want to start more cleanly than that. You don't want to be playing catch up 10 minutes into the game, against a Big Sky team at home. So state rivalry team coming in. Tad Boyle going for win 300 is the big storyline on Friday night. Win
yeah,
300 at CU, that is. And obviously, I'll be a first. He's already the all-time wins leader, but he'll be the first men's basketball coach to hit that mark. Obviously, Seal Berry with over 400 wins on the women's side, and Sox Walseth, who did own the men's record, also coached the women's team. Oh, I think I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think it was 77 wins with the women's team, putting him around
mhm,
into 330. I think it was 338, 337, something
yeah,
like that. So, well, but those are the only two coaches in CU history in any sport with more wins than Tad at this point.
yeah. That's awesome. Real quick, was there any of the newcomers that kind of jumped out at you and impressed you the other night from the opener? I know it's one game, but anybody that kind of you thought jumped out and thought, all right, that guy's gonna be a player.
Well, the obvious one is Sebastian Ronsiek, which I gotta get used to pronouncing. I've been screwing it up for most of the summer and in the preseason. You know how we work, Brian. We're worried about spelling it correctly, which I had down, but
Yeah,
I want to make sure it's pronounced correctly. But he had a great opener. Went 4 or 5 from 3-point range. I just story the other day the highest scoring game by a true freshman in the opening game since Josh Scott
yeah,
way back 12 years ago. So, but he's had a great preseason. I mean, I didn't necessarily think he would go 4 or 5 from 3-point range, but he's been maybe a bit of a revelation this preseason. He's definitely going to be someone that's going to contribute to this team. For a freshman, you stand next to him and you feel like you're standing next to a grown man. He's 6'10, 6'11, thick shoulders. He doesn't have that kind of a lot of freshmen kind of come in and, kind of maybe have the pudgy arms or just not real defined yet. But he's not like that. He looks like he's been in the weight room for years. Obviously he's a freshman. He's going to make mistakes, but, he's the guy that really jumped out on Monday night. And, the others, it's just kind of the guys that ended last year injured or had been battling injuries. RJ Smith,
yeah,
Javon Ruffin, Julian Hammond, and last year on the injured list. To see all them kind of get out there and mix it up and get up and down. In practice the other day, Javon Ruffin had a tip dunk. It's something I kind of got to see. And he's gotten over the knee problems, but to see him do that, really explode off the floor and put that thing home, I think it really kind of emphasized how far along he's come with those knees. He's really got his spring back now. So
Yeah.
kind of good to see those guys get back on the floor. His team will be a work in progress. They'll probably have more moments like that first half against Eastern Washington. But I've said it before. I don't think this is a 15th place team in the Big 12. And I'd expect them to get better as the non-conference rolls along.
Yeah, and I think for a new team like this, even if it doesn't look great for a little while, getting wins right now is just really important for a team like that. I think the same is true for the women, which went up to Wyoming and didn't have a very good start in that. They never fell behind big. I mean, I think Wyoming's biggest lead was 6, and it was 24-18 at the half. The women couldn't buy a bucket in the first half. They even couldn't hit free throws, but really had a nice second half and won 56-50. And again, 11 of 14 players on that roster are brand new. Well, 10 are newcomers. One was a redshirt last year. So 11 had never played a game with the Buffs. So I thought it was important to go up there and get a win. That's a tough environment. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've ever been up to Laramie, but that gym is not easy to go into and win. It's always every game I've covered up there, men or women, has looked exactly like Monday night's game, which is just a grind it out, sloppy looking, just get out of Laramie with a victory. And CU hasn't always done that when
Yeah.
I've been up there, so they were able to do that. And Lior Garzon, the Oklahoma State transfer, 20 points and hit a really big shot in the last minute to kind of give them some breathing room and help them pull out that win. So and the Buffs were playing without Frida Foreman, who their all-time leader in 3-point shooting and named to the I think it was the Naismith Award watch list. Um, one of those watch list, player of the year watch list. She was named to that recently. So yeah, they played without her, but nice win for the women, and they'll get better as well.
Yeah, it was the Wooden Award actually, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, that's
one of the
right.
Player of the Year awards, and obviously they'll be a better team when she gets back, and no need to rush her back at this point. But I was kind of following your scores as well, and at the end of that night on Monday, it seemed like two games that profiled similarly with
Yeah,
newer look teams that kind of I don't know, stumbled out of the gate, but certainly weren't cohesive units out of the gate, and then getting it together. I agree with you. I think the challenge for the women going up there at Wyoming was much different. That's a good little win to pick up out of the gate, and
yeah.
kind of certainly steel yourselves for the bigger games to come. So, uh, good opening night for both teams. We'll see how they build on those through the non-conference. We talked about before. It's going to be interesting to see how these new look teams kind of evolve as they get closer to Big 12 play.
Yeah, and for reference, for fans listening, that Wyoming team returned all 5 starters, 10 players overall, and was projected second in the Mountain West. I mean, they had the preseason Mountain West Player of the Year. So that was a really good team. That was a really good win for the women. So good starts for basketball. Not the cleanest starts, but nice starts to get out to 1-0. And both teams playing Northern Colorado this week. And so let's transition over to football because that's a big one for that team that they're in their groove now. I mean, this is week number 9 or game number 9, and they've got a huge opportunity, Pat. I mean, with a lot of dominoes fell Colorado's way last Saturday. It was a bye week for them, but you really could not have asked for a better bye week.
Yeah, they moved up nationally as one thing, but moved up in
Right.
the Big 12 standings without having to do anything. And, I had a feeling it was I mean, maybe not specifically those results, but you look at how the Big 12 has played out this year. And
Yeah.
I told you at one point on the side, some of those from BYU has looked really good. They've been rolling people. They have a pretty favorable schedule the rest of the
Mhm.
way. But some of the other teams that the Buffs are jockeying for position with, I mean, I told you, I'm like, someone's going to stumble along the way. This league's been too crazy.
Yep.
Kansas State barely got out of here with a win themselves. All these teams are vulnerable, and something's going to work out that the Buffs are going to have an opportunity to play their way in. Well, now it's here. They
Mhm.
didn't have to actually play any games or pick up any additional wins to do it, but the Buffs didn't anyway, and now they have this golden opportunity. So, be interesting to see how they come out of the bye. But you feel you got to play them one at a time, and the Buffs aren't going to be any more immune to kind of having that game where you stumble or just aren't playing your 100% best. But you get this one, it sets up pretty well for them to make a run at that Big 12 title game. And it really, makes you feel like that this is in itself kind of a mini playoff game for the Buffs
Right.
going forward. Deion Sanders spoke to that the other day. They're kind of in elimination game mode now. And I thought that was a pretty accurate way to describe it.
Yeah, they really are because I mean, obviously their ultimate goal is a national title, and if they want the national title, they really are in playoff mode because one more loss probably knocks them out of that running. Certainly for an at-large, but one more loss probably knocks them out of contention for a Big 12 title game appearance too. You might be able to get back in there, but you certainly don't want to take chances. And if you get a win this week, there's an opportunity to go for that Big 12 title, and it'll be interesting to see. It is a big weekend of the Big 12. You mentioned BYU; they're playing well. They go to Utah though, who's been struggling. That one's going to be interesting. Just to get off the bus for a second, because that's such a huge rivalry game, and
Yeah.
Utah coming off of a bye. Utah's struggling, but I could see a situation where Utah puts everything into that game, saying, who cares what happens the rest of our season? It's not a great
Yeah.
season. We can, if we beat BYU, this is a great year. So watch out for BYU in that one. And but this is gonna be a big one for the Buffs. I mean, they've looked good on the road, Pat, and so I'm curious to see what they look like down in Lubbock.
Yeah, to touch on that BYU Utah real quick, you feel like that's kind of one of those games where the records you kind of throw them out the window. Maybe a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit like Colorado State, but I think even amplified in the
yeah, yeah,
case of
yeah.
BYU and Utah. You feel like okay, Utah's crushing people. I'm sorry, BYU's been crushing people. Utah's been struggling. You feel like if ever it's going to be
Hmm.
an easy one, this is it. But it just seems like one of those rallies or rivalries where that's just not going to matter, and you expect that to be a dogfight all the way. So
Hmm.
certainly one to keep an eye on this weekend. But for the Buffs, Brian, coming out of the bye, obviously they've been playing well. You alluded to it; they've been playing really well on the road. To you, what's the keys for this club going down there and keeping this thing rolling?
Yeah, it's interesting because both these teams are known for throwing the ball, right? I mean, Texas Tech traditionally, we know them. Obviously, Mike Leach has not been the coach there for a long time, and the late Mike Leach, but they've always been known for that. And CU, obviously, under Shedeur Sanders, they go as he goes. But I think that the run game, I wrote about it today. I think the run game on both sides is key. Texas Tech kind of goes as Taj Brooks goes, their running back, and he is such a key to what they do. And we've seen with CU when they run the ball, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Now they don't need to run it 200 yards, but when they hit 90, 100 yards, they're pretty good. When they don't, they struggle. And so I think they've got to get the run game going. I just see this Texas Tech defense is the worst in the Big 12. Their
Yeah.
offense is the best in the Big 12, but I think that there's some opportunities for Shador to put up big numbers, but I think that he needs that running game to go with it as well. So um, I guess long, convoluted answer there. I think a lot of it comes down to the run game and whether the Buffs can kind of limit what Tech does on the ground and whether the Buffs can get some things going on the ground.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, Texas Tech is kind of a team of extremes, right? The best
Yeah.
offense in the Big 12, the lowest ranked defense in the Big 12. Buffs, kind of not middle of the pack, but kind of maybe at the top of the middle of the pack in both categories, obviously with the explosive offense, the Buffs. But I agree with you, I think, on the run game. All things being equal, maybe in that pass game, which team can establish a run? On the other side, which team can maybe stop the run? Feel like it's going to one that's is going to be the team that comes away and advantage this one. And I'm looking forward to watching it. I'll be glued in from the TV, obviously, while you're down there. But
Yeah.
I'm expecting it to be a high scoring game. We'll get into maybe predictions in a second, but I'm really curious to see how the Buffs come out of this bye. They've been playing really well. They've got some momentum going. They've had this week off. Maybe they've been able to kind of lick some wounds and get a little bit healthier. But wondering how that week off is going to affect them. And, just wondering if more, this hasn't been a team that's kind of been ruffled by any hype along the ways. They're kind
Yeah.
of programmed for it a little bit. But hey, the more you win, they keep going up in the rankings, the expectations keep going higher, the attention coming their way still increases or it continues to increase. And kind of curious to see how all of that, going into a hostile environment on top of it, how they respond to all that once they get down there.
Yeah, and you make a good point in that this team this year has not been really rattled by a lot of that stuff. I thought maybe they were last year, but this is a new team and they haven't really been. Texas Tech, meanwhile, their coach Joey McGuire talked about they've got to avoid distractions this week. Big noon kickoff is in Lubbock. They've got a big recruiting weekend, and there's a lot of things that could distract them. And so I'm curious how Texas Tech handles it because everything that's on the table for CU is on the table for Texas Tech. And
Yeah.
so both teams have a lot to play for. I feel confident in CU handling their business and not being phased by it. We'll see with Texas Tech, but that's what makes this game really interesting. I think it's, I don't know. I haven't looked around the nation if people are looking at this as like one of the big games in the country. I think this is sneakily one of the bigger
Yeah.
games in the country because I think it's got some Big 12 title game implications potentially, and it's almost, in my opinion, an elimination game in Big 12 title contention. So I think it's massive for both teams. I think it's going to be a good football game.
Yeah. Well, how do you think it's going to play out, Mr. Howell? The
Yeah,
Buffs going to stay in the race or come home disappointed?
I think they stay in the race. They've won three in a row on the road. I love the way that they're playing on the road, and they've dominated on the road the last three times. And so I don't think they're going to dominate like they did. Their last two times out, they won by 27 at Arizona, at UCF. I don't see that here, but I see them going down there and getting a win. I think that they're equipped for things like this, a situation like this. And I like the Buffs 34-28 and to come out and get a victory and stay in that Big 12 title race. What about you?
Well, folks, don't at me, but I don't think that the Buffs prevail in this one. I think it's going to be a great game. I'm going to say 38-35 Texas Tech, but I think coming out of the bye, I don't know. They've had a lot of momentum, and but Iowa State, or I'm sorry, Texas Tech has as well, coming off the big win last week themselves. As you said, everything that's on the table for the Buffs is also on the table for Texas Tech, and the Buffs have played well on the road this year. I think that's a hard thing to maintain,
Yeah.
kind of week in and week out. But I think it's gonna be a heck of a football game. The way this Big 12 is go, maybe a loss doesn't necessarily bump the Buffs out of, probably bumps out of the national playoff picture. May not necessarily bump them out of the Big 12 championship game picture.
Mhm.
They would obviously need some help along the way down the stretch. But I think 38-35 Tech, but it's going to be a classic ball game.
Awesome. Well, we'll see how it plays out, and I'll be down there. And like you said, you'll be watching. You have a Buffs basketball game to cover on Friday night as well. And real quick, couple other things with CU. Soccer team is still awaiting to see if they happen to get into the NCAA tournament. It doesn't look great for them, but there still is that shot, right?
Still a shot, looking bleak. The season ended with a quarterfinal loss in the Big 12 tournament against TCU. Really, there's so many lost opportunities for this team this season. Even if you take the early come from ahead loss against North Carolina that really should have been a win
Yeah.
against one of the top programs in the nation. But even if you just take that loss and move forward, they had a big unbeaten streak after that. But that stretch, that Winland stretch down at the end of the regular season, it was an 0-2-4 stretch, long
Mhm.
goalless streak in there. That really kind of derailed the momentum that they had. Early on, they had an opportunity, a non-conference opportunity, wiped off the board at North Carolina State, which was a potential good road result for them. Weather at
Yeah.
the time, I forget which hurricane it was, but I think the remnants of one of them was passing through North Carolina at that time, and that game got washed off the board. And they just didn't get enough quality wins along the way. Now, all hope not lost. They're kind of in the low 50s in the RPI. I haven't
Yeah.
checked today. They're going to need a little help to get in. And if they do get in, they'll kind of squeak in and almost certainly have to go on the road. So kind of a disappointing finish. This probably should have been an NCAA tournament team. They get any of those results kind of along the way. Not even all of them, but at least a couple of them. And it's a different story right now. But instead, they're kind of crossing their fingers and kind of really, really hoping for the best. Volleyball's still struggling. I checked them out on Wednesday night against Utah. Another team that they haven't won yet against a ranked team this year. I believe it's 1-12 since the start of last year against ranked teams. Obviously, a lot of teams are going to struggle against ranked teams, but
Yeah.
I think by now, I think head coach Jesse Mahoney was hoping this group would have maybe shown further strides at this point. I didn't think anyone really thought they'd be in contention for the NCAA bid or even a Big 12 conference championship run this year. They're a little young and inexperienced for that, but they've been competitive at times within matches. The first set was a nail biter. They come back and win the second one. And then they just have long stretches where they just kind of fall apart. They have a hard time kind of putting a complete match together.
Right.
Offensively, they've struggled. So you think down the stretch here, not too many games left, but you want to kind of get some results. On the bright side, they have let's top 25 matches coming up and a lot more home matches to finish. So maybe you can get some momentum, kind of work some things out, and maybe feel like you hit that offseason with a little bit more momentum. But right now, it's a team that got 6 straight losses and really struggling to generate some consistent offense.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they can get it together, and we'll see what happens with soccer and basketball now in full swing. And so a lot of things going on with CU, but obviously a lot of the focus is going to be on that football team in this game down in Lubbock. And Pat, we'll be back next week and talk about what happened down in Lubbock and preview a game with Utah. So
Yeah,
enjoy
enjoy
your
Lubbock.
weekend. Yeah.
Enjoy Lubbock. I can't imagine you haven't been there before, I'm
Never
guessing.
been there. Never been there.
Yeah.
So looking forward. If I can get out, we'll see. With all the snow, I should be able to get out. But
If you find a good restaurant, you'll have to let me know. My Lubbock trip is until the end of the regular season. I think it's actually
yeah,
the beginning of March
yeah,
when basketball's there. I did look up though. I'm a huge music fan, as you know. The Buddy Holly Museum is there in Lubbock. I
right.
might, if the schedule works out, I might try to hit that in March. But if you find a good restaurant, you'll have to let me know.
I'll let you know. I'll let Buff fans know as well. And Pat, we'll talk to you next week.
All right, folks. As always, thanks for listening.